Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and this video is a starter guide for Remnant 2. If there is anything you're wondering about that isn't covered in the video, feel free to ask in the comments down below, and I'll get back to you ASAP. On screen now are some time codes you can use to jump to specific segments, or you can use the video's seek bar. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Remnant 2 is a game that's easy to get into and a little harder to master. On the surface, there isn't too much going on. You can equip 2 firearms, a long arm, a sidearm, and a melee weapon. Armour provides defensive stats and weighs different amounts, but can't be upgraded, and there's no real set bonuses this time around. So you might as well just equip whatever you think looks cool. The thresholds for weight are 25, 50, and 75. If you exceed 75 weight, you will no longer be able to roll, instead you will flop or dive in most circumstances. This can be modified with certain item combinations. The most noticeable difference is of course the rolls, so you'll want to find a nice damage resistance and weight ratio. Heavier armour of course benefits you with higher damage resistance, but weighs more. There's no glamour system in Remnant 2 at time of writing, but you're largely free to equip whatever you want. Creating your character in Remnant is a very basic affair. The appearance is largely irrelevant, and although you'll pick a starting class or archetype, you can swap between any of those you have unlocked. Of course, some may be easier to unlock than others. If you're playing on console, then of course you'll be using a gamepad. If you're on PC, you can use the gamepad, but I would recommend using mouse and keyboard. Beyond the obvious usual benefits such as increased turning speed and accuracy, the keybinds on the gamepad are, by default, weird, unhelpful at times. Ability usage and the interact buttons being awkward. I've seen people reload when they want to revive, for example, hundreds of times. Remnant 2 is primarily made up of 3 planets: Nerude, Losum, which I have a habit of calling London, and Yeisha. When you start the game, you'll play through a fairly short and pretty bad, if I'm being honest, tutorial area. Soon enough, you'll have access to your first world. If you get Nerude, I would suggest Rerolling, as it's a miserable first world experience. That brings me onto the topic of worlds and Rerolling. So, Remnant 2 is split into 2 modes at the moment: Story, Campaign mode, and Adventure mode. These can be re-rolled, which will reset the world, enemy, item, bosses, and quests. However, it won't reset anything about your character, your levels, your weapons. All that progress remains. For example, you could clear Nerude, then re-roll and do Nerude again. Any items you picked up the first time that happen to have spawned again can be picked up again, that will either be turned into scrap, the game's currency, or level up if it's a weapon. For the most part, you're better off re-rolling Adventure mode, as there are certain story areas which can't be played in Adventure mode. The Labyrinth and Final area, for example. Each world in Remnant 2 has, not including the DLC, 2 main variants. You could say there are 2 story paths for each world, so you won't see everything on one playthrough. Indeed, certain items will only spawn in certain areas, which are randomly assigned to a world's role. Other items are vaguely assigned as random world drops from a pool, and which you get in any set role will vary. Think of it this way: let's say Nerude has 20 different areas. You can only get 10 of them per role. Let's say there's 100 items, you can only get 20 of them per role. So when you re-roll, you will get different items, different areas, and of course, the different main story path. Progress and difficulty in Remnant 2 is decided by several factors. As you play the game, you'll notice numbers above the minimap next to the area name. This generally caps out at 21, that is to say it is your power level plus 1. That is the world level. This increases naturally as you progress the game, but it also increases when you enhance your weapon at the hub. Taking or increasing trait levels does not increase your character and world level. This is helpful to know for hardcore mode, for example. The Iron Man mode, where if you die, you're done. That character is gone forever. Unless you made a backup save or something sneaky like that. Also in hardcore mode, if you're playing with multiple people, it's only game over if you all die. So a strategy you can use is to have 1 or 2 players go in to challenge a boss, and another player stays at the checkpoint to respawn them upon their demise. In general gameplay, however, there's no real need to artificially limit or restrict the world level. Other than this, you have the difficulty levels: Survivor, Veteran, Nightmare, and Apocalypse. The difference between these isn't really that much other than numbers go up. And even on the easiest mode, it's not an extremely easy game, enemies still hit quite hard. Higher difficulties will unlock access to stronger relic fragments, stat boosting items that you will equip onto your legally distinct Estus Flask. Speaking of which, relics are the Estus Flasks of Remnant 2, and there are many you can find throughout the game. They are upgraded through a fairly rare currency called Simulacrum. Typically, I would suggest playing through the game for the first time on Survivor. Once you've gotten a couple of items, maybe a few runs in, you can swap to Apocalypse for superior EXP gains and relic fragments. Incidentally, another currency in Remnant 2 is Relic Dust. This is something you can spend at the NPC vendor Dwell in the main hub. However, you only want to start spending it at him when A, you are on Apocalypse difficulty, and you can set this at the hub even if you don't go into any levels, and B, your Archetype level is above 75. So what is Archetype level? Well, every class or Archetype in the game can hit up to level 10. So let's say you have 2 Archetypes at level 10 and another at level 5. That means your total Archetype level is 25. And you want to be Archetype level 76 before you start spending Relic Dust at Dwell. Simple enough, right? Even a cat could understand it. So you might argue there's no real benefit to playing Apocalypse difficulty until you are Archetype level 76. However, you will gain greater EXP in Apocalypse. I would suggest try it as soon as you have a maxed out weapon and an archetype maxed out that you like, and see how it feels. If it's too hard, go back down. But generally speaking, if you're able to play on Apocalypse, there's no reason not to. Other currencies include Scrap, the main currency, Tears of Iron that are used like Titanite in Dark Souls to upgrade weapons, Luminite crystals used to craft weapons and other items, Corrupted shards, which drop from rare, aberrant red enemies that can spawn, and are used to unlock alternative guns from Dwell. Costs 10 for each gun generally, and you can only carry 10 at a time. Finally, Corrupted Luminite crystals are used to upgrade Mutators at Dwell. Most currencies can be found just by playing the game, destroying enemies, opening chests, and so on. Corrupted shards are very rare. Sometimes they do events where they are extremely frequent, and playing on higher difficulties will increase the spawn chance for those enemy types. Finally, on the subject of world rerolling and being a completionist, if you're on the PC platform, I would highly suggest a tool called Remnant 2 World Analyzer, or Remnant 2 Save Guardian, which allows you both to back up your saves in case you lose them, but more importantly, scan your game world and see what rolls you get. In essence, if you are re-rolling for a specific area, let's say the Tomb of the Dwarves, because you need an item that only spawns there, it's going to save you a lot of time if you can use this tool. Because you can re-roll your world, open the tool, and it will tell you all of the areas you got, and all of the items that will be spawning. I learned of its existence after playing through London and Nerude 10 plus times in search of a very specific item combination, which was driving me demented. And this tool makes your life so much easier. Remember though, the game is designed to be replayed. You won't see everything in 1 or even 5 playthroughs. There are currently 14 archetypes or classes in Remnant 2. 3 of these are locked behind the 3 DLCs. For the base game, however, we have Challenger, Handler, Hunter, Gunslinger, Medic, Alchemist, Archon, Engineer, Explorer, Invader, and Summoner. When you start the game, you'll be able to pick between Challenger, Handler, Hunter, and Medic. Once you unlock a new class, like let's say you unlock Archon, if you make a new character, you can start that character as an Archon. Once you've progressed a little ways into the game, you'll unlock the ability to equip a second Archetype. You will enjoy most of the benefits of each, although you will only get the prime perk of your first Archetype. Speaking of which, each Archetype has a trait, a prime perk, damage perk, team perk, utility perk, and relic perk, and 3 different skills. You can only choose one of these skills at a time. So if you have 2 Archetypes equipped, you'll have 1 skill from each Archetype. Are there any downsides to equipping 2 Archetypes? Well, EXP you gain is split between all equipped Archetypes. So if you're in a rush to level up your first one because you really want that last skill, you might want to hold off on equipping a second for the time being. But otherwise, there's no downsides. A second Archetype provides you passive bonuses and active bonuses. Once you've taken an Archetype to level 10, you will unlock its Archetype trait, meaning you can invest points into it and use that trait, even if you aren't using the Archetype. Some Archetypes complement each other more than others, but it's up to you to find the combination that works for you. The process of unlocking an Archetype generally involves finding an item in the world that you then take back to the hub and give to a certain NPC, and then he will convert it into a class item, or Archetype item. A bunch of them can just be straight up bought at the hub, however, from the start of the game. Now I'll briefly go over the Archetypes. The Challenger is the nearest thing the starting classes have to a tank or bruiser Archetype. Defensive traits and skills, good for close range. The Handler enjoys all-round utility and has a dog companion which can boost the Handler and the team in various ways. The Hunter is a firearms expert and often forms the core of any traditional gun-based build. The Gunslinger forms the other half of the gun duo. Whilst the Hunter focuses a little more on damage buffs that involve weapons, the Gunslinger is more about the weapons themselves. The Medic is of course a healer, but also one of the strongest Archetypes that sits as an amazing second choice for almost any build thanks to its incredibly strong perks. The Alchemist is similar to the Medic in that it is an amazing secondary Archetype choice, throwing alchemy vials to boost the team's power. The Archon is all about weapon mod generation and also some powerful skills. The Engineer is a heavy weapon user and the tankiest of all Archetypes, able to use extremely powerful turrets, either directly by holding them as a heavy weapon or placing it down as an automated sentry. The Explorer is another utility or all-rounder with team boosts and general adventuring boosts. The Invader is the strongest melee option in the base game Archetypes, with auto-dodge or teleports behind you kid skills. Finally, the Summoner is, well, a summoner, able to delegate damage taken and other benefits to the monsters they are accompanied by. They can also sacrifice said monsters for bonuses. As for the DLC Archetypes, currently we have 3. The Ritualist is my favourite. In fact, I held off on buying Remnant 2 until it came out, as it was exactly what I was after, all about damage over time and status effects which spread between enemy to enemy like a living bomb. The Invoker, meanwhile, is all about skills and skill damage. Summon lightning storms, enhance your weapons with the power of sand, and such. Finally, the third DLC Archetype is the Warden. Whilst it shines as a support archetype with strong shield powers and a pet drone, you can certainly make it work as your primary too. It's a good all-rounder. Many of these archetypes are unlocked through rather esoteric means. In fact, a lot of Remnant 2's secrets are really obtuse, and I would say don't be afraid to look things up, because the chances of someone finding everything by themselves are slim. So play through the game once or twice without looking anything up, but after that, yeah, look things up, because you're unlikely to find it by yourself. Fortunately, Rerolling Worlds makes finding all of the archetypes fairly stress-free, although sometimes you will need a bit of time invested, such as for the Archon. Incidentally, if you do want to look things up or you want a great resource for the game, check out the website remnant.wiki, which is also linked in the description. It's a great community-made resource that has all the information you could need. As you play Remnant 2, you'll find trait books, which are blue items in the environment. You can have a little over 100 trait points in total. Once you've obtained them all, excess trait books that you pick up will convert into scrap automatically. You can also gain traits through other means. Safe to say, you'll not want for them just by playing the game. You don't need to go out of your way to find them. Traits are stat boosts that enhance your build, and can be saved per loadout. So you might need more skill cooldown on one build, but not another. So you can save your traits to each loadout. Handy. If you want a loadout that is, say, Ritualist and Archon, you can have that as one loadout, then you can have another loadout that is Gunslinger and Hunter. And they can each have their own set of traits as well as items. If you buy the Orb of Undoing in the hub, you can freely respec them however you like. The Orb of Undoing is now unlimited use, so you can use it to respec as many times as you want for free. Each archetype has an initial spread of traits, as well as a unique archetype trait, such as the Engineer's Fortify trait, which increases your armor effectiveness at 50% at max level, or the Summoner's Regrowth, which gives you a passive 1.5 health regen at max level. So even if you aren't playing the Summoner, it's worth maxing out the Summoner to level 10 to unlock the trait so that you can use it even when you aren't playing Summoner. Note, if you are playing the Summoner, you'll just have it for free. Otherwise, you gotta invest 10 points into it. This encourages you to max out all the archetypes, or at least any of them that have a nice trait, such as Engineer and Summoner. Those two are very powerful traits for all classes and all playstyles in my opinion. The latter, the Summoner's Regrowth, being MVP. I think that's the best archetype trait. Aside from archetype traits, there are core traits that you start the game with. More health, more stamina, mod power, skill cooldown. Max health is always good to have, in my opinion. Beyond these, you have the traits that you'll unlock as you play the game. Some are from quests, some are very well hidden, but a good number of them are worth checking out. My pick of must-have traits would include Bark Skin, Amplitude, Siphoner, and if you're playing co-op, Revivalist. So, armor is largely for defense, but that leaves you with an amulet slot, 4 ring slots, 3 weapon slots. This is what makes up a build in Remnant 2, your gear. There are hundreds of rings and amulets. You'll often find they have great synergy with each other. For example, I use an amulet that boosts status effect damage, along with rings that increase status effect duration. Weapons that inflict statuses, all combined with my archetype, which is focused on status effects. You can build almost any type of build you can imagine. A tank build that is nigh unkillable, a speedster, a weak point sniper, a melee champion, a mage, a powerful healer, or a team booster. It's up to you. This is one of Remnant's strongest points, allowing you the freedom to play the game in the manner you wish. Of course, some builds will naturally be stronger than others, some weapons are stronger than others, but that isn't a huge issue in the game, as there's virtually no time attack or DPS checks that mandate you to a certain playstyle. That said, melee builds may struggle more than others, as certain enemies or bosses just really aren't designed around melee, and you'll have trouble clonking them. Weapons are all upgraded to either 25 or plus 10 for boss weapons. Rings and amulets do not need to be upgraded. Your relic, your Estus flask, can be upgraded to hold more charges, and also it holds 3 fragments, which boost your stats. These stat boosts will be paltry until fairly far into the game, as covered earlier, when you unlock the mythic fragments in Apocalypse at archetype level 76 and above. At least, that was the case until the 3rd DLC. These days, fragments are decoupled from the relics and work with the new Prism system. Prisms are a sort of long-term progression system in Remnant 2, where as you continue to play the game, you'll be able to select from a pool of stats to increase and add on to your prism. For example, reload speed, fire rate, health, and so on. But you might get lucky and be able to fuse stats together, allowing you to have a single prism slot that gives you both health and stamina, despite taking up just one slot. Relics also factor into your build, as some relics you find might be perfect for, say, a shield tank build. Typically, it is better, I would say, to find items that synergize with each other for your build. You can go with a jack of all trades, master of none kind of playstyle, but you won't be as effective as a specialist. As for relics, again, it depends on your playstyle. I generally pick a rather hard to acquire relic that just gives you passive health regen, and when you use it, it doubles your health regen. Because I have found my favourite playstyle revolves around never really actively using a heal item. I just rely on life drain and passive health regen. But there are a lot of relics and a lot of playstyles involving them. You may also see colour-coded afflictions and elements on certain gear, such as fire. This causes damage over time, you can roll to remove it if you are on fire. Corrosive. Deals damage over time and increases damage taken by 10%. Bleeding. Deals damage over time, reduces the effectiveness of healing. Shock. Deals AoE damage every few seconds, can increase damage if multiple shocked enemies are nearby, chaining and arcing off each other. All of these effects can be applied to player as well as enemies. You'll also find things that slow, which slows, bulwark, which boosts defense, and haste, which predictably increases speed. Those are the main ones. And then there are blights, which the player can contract. Generally, you can't inflict blights on enemies, as a rule of thumb. Blights, though, all suck. Root Rot reduces your max stamina and makes you cough. Contamination is a huge bunch of damage when it accumulates. Curse reduces your max health, and it stacks. Suppression reduces your mod generation, and Data Corruption prevents you from using items or skills. All blights can be cured with consumable items that you can find or buy in the hub. Incidentally, items that have been upgraded can be downgraded, restoring some of the spent materials and cost to you. So if you upgrade your starting gun to +8, then you find a new gun that you want to replace it with, you can get some of the materials back and take your starting gun back to base level. With the advent of the third and final DLC for Remnant 2, Boss Rush mode was added to the game. This isn't just fight every boss in the game, but a fleshed out mode with what you might consider roguelike or roguelite aspects. You'll fight enemies, then bosses, and you'll be able to select various temporary power-ups just for this Boss Rush mode to aid you in your run as you take on various difficulties. There are various rewards tied to it, as with hardcore mode for example, but Boss Rush is also a good way to gain powerful materials to develop your characters. It could be one of the best ways to farm prisms and corrupted shards. It's a very new mode at time of writing, but promises to be one that will help with new ways to help develop your characters and add further replayability to the game to boot. Alright, so Mutators are items that you equip to your weapon, one per weapon. These enhance the weapon in various ways. For example, the Bandit Mutator grants you a chance to restore a certain amount of ammo to the magazine of the weapon. You can level up Mutators at Dwell, so for example as you level up the Bandit Mutator you'll have a higher chance to restore ammo. Once you reach the max level of a Mutator, it gets a bonus. Bandits, for example, when it does restore ammo, fire rate will be increased. Mods, meanwhile, are something that you can put on every weapon. Some weapons will have their own unique mods that you can't take off. They are a sort of weapon ability, you could say. So, a unique weapon like a boss weapon will have its own unique ability, whereas a more generic gun may have just a slot for a mod, but it won't have its own unique one, and you can put any one you want onto it. So unique mods can't be changed, whereas other weapons can have any mod put onto them. So when you see stats referring to mod generation, it basically means how fast the weapon's special ability comes back, and these weapon mods can do anything from shoot out giant firestorms, place electric rods into the environment, make you a big cube shield, or maybe just infuse your bullets with an element type such as acid bullets. Mods do not need to be leveled up, but they generally scale with the level of the weapon they are equipped to. So if you put the same mod on a +1 weapon versus a +25 weapon, it will seem a lot stronger on the +25. Finding the right mutators and mods for your build isn't too hard, fortunately. Once you've decided on some keywords for your build, you can focus on mods, mutators, rings and amulets that all include those keywords and go to town. Of course, when you start the game, you're not going to have 50 rings to choose from, so you just make do with what you have. But that is largely what Remnant 2 boils down to, finding items that make your dream build come together. And on that note, if you have any questions about builds, or about the game in general, that weren't covered here, or indeed if you have your own tips that you'd like to share that I missed, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, until next time, take care.